Welcome to FreightWaves Today. It is Monday, and we have a packed show for you today. Amazing guest, as we always have. Julie, I got to tell you, the quality of guests that we keep getting are absolutely insane. And so for those that thought that we were going to bring some initial guests on, that was going to end, we've disproven that because we have an amazing lineup today, as we will every single day. What's sort of top of mind today in freight?
So first of all, I want to speak on the guests. I actually was talking about that this weekend and how obviously I've learned a lot about TV and doing this in the last 2 weeks, but I have learned so much from our guests. Every interview, I feel like I have learned something, and I am more informed on what's going on in our industry and what's happening in the market as a whole, even than I was before looking at sonar data all day, every day. So I think the context is incredibly helpful and been really great.
I have gotten, and for those that are out there, thank you for sending me the inbound notes. It always is encouraging. There's about 24 people when you look at the entire production staff, the sales staff, the folks that put the show together, producers, etc. It's a big production. I don't think people realize that we have about 20 people involved in the show that are putting this together on a daily basis. It's a lot of work, and it's amazing to get the feedback that we get about how rewarding it is, the people that are tuning in. We want to thank our audience for doing that because that's what supports us. We want to thank our sponsors. It's been very encouraging. It's an idea that we've talked about for many years. I'm glad to see it executing, and you have grown into the role. And I mean this with all due love. There are folks that have watched it very early and have talked about how significantly improved everything is, and commented how you've really showed up and done an amazing job here as a host. For having zero on-air experience.
That's absolutely right. Like I said in the beginning, I'm not a newscaster or a TV personality, but I love talking about freight, and it's getting better and easier every day.
It is fun talking about freight. Like last week, I was describing this at a conference about the fact that big tech media likes to focus on, or big business media likes to focus on technology. Obviously, the SpaceX IPO was going to be a topic of conversation for probably forever, at least SpaceX, AI, fashion, media. We talk about the boring parts of the economy, but for those that are in freight, know that it's not boring at all. Years ago, I was asked, how do I create a media business based on freight? But if you've been paying attention to FreightWaves Today and just reading FreightWaves, you know that it's not a boring topic. We're going to get into a lot of things today. We have the GOAT, Brad Jacobs, on the show. He's going to talk about his book, what he's learned at building $8 billion companies. Not 8 billion, but 8 different companies worth over $1 billion. We're going to hit up Doug Marcello. He's an attorney. He's going to talk about the SCOTUS ruling. He has a CDL, so he's going to provide some firsthand account. We got Jordan Graft, the most impactful founder in freight tech in the last 10 years, that's going to talk about what managing fraud looks like in a world. So we definitely going to get into that. We have Seth Holm, the founder and portfolio manager at West Brow Capital, who's based in Chattanooga, by the way, is going to talk about, he's a former Sonar guy. JP Hampstead was on last week. We were talking about Amazon's LTO. We're going to hear from Seth. He runs a very large portfolio for investment. And then we've got Alex Girgis, thank you for that. The co-founder and CEO of Off the Record is going to talk about drivers and how they can deal with their speeding tickets, and frankly, getting it off your record, which is important. But with that, let's hear about what's happening in freight today.
We kick things off in Washington, where a renewed push to tax Chinese cargo ships has agricultural shippers warning of catastrophic consequences for U.S. crop exporters. Democratic Senators Mark Kelly of Arizona and Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts are pressing the Trump administration to reinstate port fees on Chinese vessels calling U.S. ports. The charges, which were implemented earlier this year following a U.S. Trade Representative investigation into unfair Chinese maritime subsidies, were suspended until November after China applied reciprocal fees on U.S. lines. The Agriculture Transportation Coalition says the proposals threaten the very existence of large segments of U.S. agriculture by denying them the ability to continue exporting. A March study prepared by Trade Partnership Worldwide detailing the impact of port fees was included in a letter signed by 277 trade associations and sent to the administration and Congress. Over at the Port of Los Angeles, the nation's busiest container gateway is bracing for a significant downturn while massively ramping up infrastructure spending. The Los Angeles Board of Harbor Commissioners has approved a $3.4 billion annual budget for fiscal year 2026 through 2027, even as the port forecasts a 7% decline in box volumes to 9.3 million 20-foot equivalent units. Port management cited continued volatility in global trade and uncertainty about trade policy as contributing factors to the more cautious cargo volume outlook. The Trump administration's trade war with China has keenly impacted the San Pedro Bay complex, with China's share of all containerized imports through Los Angeles falling to about 40% in 2026, down from 53.4% in 2025 and 61% in 2020. Despite the volume decline, the budget increase of $665 million over the prior year is mostly driven by a 31% expansion for capital improvements, with capital spending set to hit a 10-year mark. Finally, a bold vision for autonomous cross-border freight is taking shape along the Texas-Mexico border. At the 9th Annual Modernization of Cross-Border Trade Conference in Laredo this week, industry leaders debated the Green Corridors Project, a privately funded initiative proposing a 165-mile elevated guideway linking Laredo and Monterey through a network of autonomous freight shuttles. According to Lauren Alcock, chief of staff for the project, the system would feature secure terminals in both cities connected by a closed-loop automated corridor designed to bypass traditional border bottlenecks, with freight trailers loaded onto autonomous AI-enabled shuttles capable of moving cargo continuously between the two markets without stopping at the international boundary. The corridor could ultimately handle as many as 10,000 trailers per day in each direction and is expected to cost between $6 billion and $10 billion, targeting a 2030 launch.
Julie, I got to ask, the autonomous conversation has come up twice in the past couple of days. We had the Volvo full autonomous by 2027. It makes sense on the Mexico border. That actually makes absolute sense. I can't imagine, as our audience has strong opinions, they're going to be very upset about autonomous trucks moving freight across border. To me, it feels like a really interesting opportunity.
I think of almost all of the use cases we've discussed for autonomous. This one makes the most sense. It's a closed loop. It's an incredibly heavy lane going in both directions. It creates significantly more efficiency to keep moving in both directions,
I mean,
as there's less going in than coming out. So if you have a deadhead on the way back and you're not paying a driver and the truck just keeps moving constantly.
And you're only going over, a 20-mile border. I mean, effectively, it's a very small distance. Makes perfect sense. I think you could argue EVs would also make sense in that.
And you're not having humans cross the border over
That's
and over again
key.
for
immigration. I could actually see an entire, look, for those that are looking at legal guidance, immigration's obviously been a hot topic. There's a lot of question about cabotage. The ATA has been out about this. Derek Leathers, the CEO of Werner, has talked about cabotage breaking of drivers that come across the border who stay here for over a month. The DOT is looking at it. To me, it feels like a very autonomous lane. It's going to be highly controversial because it's interesting, a topic like that, where we've argued that we need to have tighter immigration standards, but then people are very anti-autonomous. I don't know how our driver population or my friends on FreightX, if you're on X, please comment about that. I'd love to know how you feel about it. We should ask the question of the day. You guys think, you're a fan of Sesame Street?
Yeah.
I was a fan of Sesame Street.
Yeah.
Number of the day, question of the day. Do you think that autonomous trucks should be enabled on cross-border traffic from Mexico to the U.S.? It feels like an answer in an immigration question.
Well, listen, and if I'm a driver, I don't want to sit waiting to go through customs. I don't want to sit at the border. I want to be getting miles and moving. So again, to me, this is another reason why it makes sense. Now, I don't know about the security part of it.
Honestly, it feels like
and the
it might be
regulation
more secure
around
if you could lock it down.
ensuring what is actually in the truck that's
You would know who's doing it. So the question of the day, do you think autonomous should exist on cross-border? I'd love to hear it. Before we go, we got to talk about this because we're about to get to our first guest, but I got to ask you, oil prices have crashed because, I don't know, crash is really a relative term, but have come down to $80 a barrel,
Cooled,
WTI. We're going to get into that with Sonar. But the Hormuz looks like there is some resolution. It feels like it's official this time.
We'll know on the 19th for sure, right?
Yeah, I mean, who knows? But the president's teased this constant, hey, we're getting resolution, there's a deal on the table. It does feel like this time, at least oil markets and equity markets have said, yes, they think it's real. But of course, price of fuel is dropping. That's going to help out the owner-operators that are buying fuel. It does also just generally lower the cost for shippers that are having to buy capacity in the market with fuel surcharges. Really interesting topic. We're going to keep an eye on that, report on that.
We can talk more about that on this Sonar update and what that impact might be to the market and rates as a whole. But yes, let's get to our first guest.
So our first guest is Doug Marcello. He, as a CDL, so he is someone who can talk about firsthand knowledge. He is a shareholder/attorney at Saxton and Stump. And I imagine, Doug, welcome to the show. Welcome to FreightWaves Today.
Thank you very much. Honored to be here. Thank you.
Man, I can't imagine a more fitting guest than everything going on in the world of freight. Obviously, lawyers are all over this industry, both plaintiffs and defense attorneys. We had the huge SCOTUS decision not too long ago. First of all, I got to ask, were you surprised by SCOTUS's unanimous decision?
I was. First of all, Craig, anything unanimous by the Supreme Court is an anomaly nowadays. Second, I think the general consensus was, both in some of the plaintiff attorneys I spoke with, they anticipated the Supreme Court to affirm the holding or to take the position that the safety exception did not allow suits against brokers. So I think a lot of people were caught surprised by that.
And what do you think the outcome of this? I mean, we've had the decision. People are trying to digest it. Insurance markets have been, I've heard, all over the board. Actually, someone commented last week who's a broker, said they actually got a reduction in their insurance rate. I found that surprising, but that was sort of counter to what we've all talked about. But what's the post of this as you see it?
Craig, I think the main thing is when I looked at some of the other transportation media, they kind of downplayed it, said that, one quoted analyst of saying, well, they had this in several circuits, so it wasn't going to be a big deal. I saw things from the broker industry saying no big change. I was at a conference they spoke. I think it's a huge deal. And here's the thing for those of us who are out there on the front line of trucking litigation. It's not a situation where, as they seize upon Judge Kavanaugh's concurring decision, that says, well, brokers can defend themselves if they chose what the justice called a reputable broker. Only less than 5% of cases go to trial. Sedgwick put out a study, only 1% of their cases go to trial. It's not about trial. And what people don't talk about, Craig, are the nuclear settlements. Nuclear settlements are driven by leverage, and this decision gave the billboard attorneys leverage in these situations. It's a situation akin to a couple weeks ago, Phillies are playing the Pirates. Pirates are up by 2. Phillies have the bases loaded. Kyle Schwarber comes up. He had hit 2 home runs already. They walked him intentionally and let a run score as opposed to giving up the home run, the grand slam. We're seeing cases settled now for exorbitant amounts rather than give up the litigation grand slam of a nuclear verdict. So I think it's going to have a huge impact in that regard. It's going to make brokers almost the excess insurer of the trucking companies. Trucking company settles for their limits, probably $1 million. It's going to go to the broker then. Do you feel comfortable taking this to trial? You want to run the risk? Or is it a situation you want to settle? I think that's where it's going to roll over to.
Doug, the most important part of that conversation, you said other freight media. Obviously, that's the problem with that entire topic, is people should get their source only from FreightWaves. It should be the only media source they get it from. But I want to talk about this because I got a lot of pushback as well about some of the conversation. A lot of brokers were very defensive. As you mentioned, they're saying, hey, this isn't a big deal. I do everything correctly. Now, I have been part of a family that owned one of the largest trucking companies, and was frequently sued for no fault of the drivers or the carrier. And anyone who's ever been in asset-based trucking knows that particularly the larger carriers, that the compliance and safety and insurance groups run those businesses to mitigate risk. That's a very new development for freight brokers, where perhaps the compliance person existed mostly on security and sort of mitigate if something happened around the freight having claims. But we're talking about a completely different playbook, where now plaintiffs' attorneys are going to find fault in anything and everything that they can prove or at least argue that you've done. I don't think brokers are prepared for that.
No, and the nuclear verdicts, Craig, don't come so much from the facts of the accident. They come from the plaintiff attorneys seizing upon systemic failures of those in the supply chain. Right now, it's the carriers. It's what they do or fail to do in their hiring, training, supervision, along those lines. We're going to see that next in terms of the brokers. Did the broker, in selecting this carrier, make an informed decision and do a good job to make sure it was a safe carrier? Well, think of the world they're tossed into. I contacted the folks at the cab report, and the data they gave me is 95% of the carriers that have had at least one inspection are unrated. We have only 40,000 satisfactory carriers, according to their data. The conditional carriers, the unsat carriers, those I think are going to be ones that the brokers are going to be hesitant, if not loath, to proceed with in that case.
Yeah, I want to talk about shippers a little bit as well. So obviously the Texas Supreme Court had quite a different ruling than when it comes to shippers than SCOTUS did in the Montgomery case. So you mentioned how much of this settlement, right, really going to trial is the outlier. What is the reality of the Texas Supreme Court ruling and what that means for shippers, and what is the settlement value concern still surrounding that?
Well, it's interesting, Jolie, and in the words of Cody Johnson, that's Texas, And so what we have here is a situation where the Texas Supreme Court said that on a very torts 101 law school basis, look, you can't be liable unless you have a duty. And duty, a key factor is foreseeability. So in terms of when Home Depot hired, in that case, it was Werner, satisfactory rating. And the allegation was, among others, that Home Depot didn't check the drivers or the specific driver, as well as criticism of their choosing Werner in that regard. The Texas Supreme Court said, well, look, what we have and what you're asking us is to set up a system that is unworkable and something along the lines of having the shippers to then, in effect, do the same thing that the Federal Motor Carrier has been asked to do. And in that case, they found there was no duty, no liability. And that's after it got through the trial level court and the appellate court. So the overall picture on it, the Montgomery decision looked at the F quad A. Is there immunity? And found that there's not. It's not preempted. The next step is, okay, let's go to the legal aspects of it. Is there a duty on it? Now we're talking shippers in the Texas case. I anticipate there's going to be a stronger argument for a duty on brokers because they're engaged on a day-to-day basis in the freight itself. While you have many sophisticated shippers that are like that, I think it's going to be more so the argument against the brokers. And as you said, Craig, they're going to be analyzing, scrutinizing everything that broker did or more so failed to do on that.
Yeah, as my father likes to say, the emergence of the idea that plaintiffs' attorneys can shop, basically go in and look for basically anything and everything that went wrong, where that's a change in his career, where it used to be that the plaintiffs' attorneys had to make a very narrow case, or at least that was what the courts treated it. Nowadays, plaintiffs' attorneys don't even know what you did or didn't do, and they'll go through and dig through every single, as discovery process, every single thing, which is expensive in itself. If you've ever been in a lawsuit of any type, knows that just to even get to discovery, you're talking potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, to get through the process and to have to open up not just your books, but all the information that you have on that and do it. Craig, you've spoken a number of times about, I think it was your brother told you that the cases that they end up paying 15, 20, 30,000 just because there's a claim brought against them. And I think now brokers have to look at it. I've spoken to the ATA safety a number of times. One thing I used to talk about is the defensible driver. This year I was talking about how I think AI, the machine learning, is going to be the key to our defense in these cases if we're proactive. I think brokers have to start with the notion of we are not just hiring a carrier, we're preparing our defense. And if we've got to sit in that courtroom, if we're there at the courtroom table, what is it we'd want to show to the jury and to the court in terms of our decision? We made a proper decision, and then create that going ahead of time. Get the data, get the information, show that based upon the analysis that this is a safe broker based upon that information.
Yeah, my brother did point that out. One of the nice things about the fact that he's not in the industry and has, by the way, zero plans to come back, being a CEO of a public traded company, said, peace, I'm going to build homes. We're going to hear from Brad Jacobs later today about how home building is different than trucking. Man, if you thought, these contractors that talk about home building being difficult, My brother could testify that being a CEO of a trucking company is much harder. But he did point out that because nuclear verdicts get all the attention. He's like, look, that isn't the problem for a company like U.S. Express. Yes, that risk existed, but we were prepared for that. The risk or the cost that he talked about that is often misunderstood that brokers haven't had to deal with is anytime there's even the smallest fender bender, the most innocuous accident or rub, if you will, very small accidents, a driver runs over a light pole at Walmart or something. He's like, every single time there was an accident or a problem, we were getting daily would get tens or hundreds potential of these payouts. And he's like, it would cost $15,000 to $20,000 just to resolve them. We never turned them into insurance. We just had to go and we had to hire a local counsel to go file with the courts to basically settle it out. And he's like, that was the most expensive part of the entire process. And he's like, look, if brokers get called into that and they're involved in at least 30% of every transaction across the space, he's like, that's the part that's going to eat them alive, is these very small lawsuits, not the big ones.
Yeah, I mean, I sit in meetings every 2 weeks, and the reality is,
was it a big quantum of just little incidents?
it was everything that we could get ahead of and settle before you get bad press on it or before it could potentially be taken to court. Because the reality is, and brokers aren't any more, juries are not, they don't like trucking companies, and they're not going to like brokers either.
I think
so you don't
I've
want to get to that
argued,
point.
and I love to, Doug, I mean, you've argued in front of courts, but it strikes me, there was a conversation a couple of weeks ago, we had our fraud summit, and the statement was made by someone in the audience is that brokers are going to have a lot less sympathy than even trucking companies, because brokers are so I think of the states where you have percentage liability is actually the issue, is where you could have a case where it's a $10 million reward, and they could decide that the broker is 40% responsible simply because they don't like them or they don't like the reality. I mean, how are you advising clients?
Yeah, that's going to be a challenge, because I think a couple of weeks ago you talked about I think it was $51 million verdict in which the driver the first time around wasn't found responsible for anything. Yeah, a lot of times plaintiff firms don't even sue the driver, or they'll dismiss the driver after depositions because they know the driver engenders sympathy. People can relate. Everybody's had an accident. But now let's take it to the next level. Broker, they are an intermediary who are not delivering the service that is seen readily by the public, but they are the ones who are monetizing the interaction out there and are the ones who are actually doing the selection process.
Yeah, the whole freight going. I had a CEO of a mega fleet that sent me a text message just talking about how this could be sort of portrayed to plaintiff's attorneys could portray it to the jury as like, look, I think the quote was something like, broker changed to their desk, was pregnant, the whole TQL sort of reference. And then they made so much money, they gonged it, bragging about how much money they made. The rip of the day becomes a problem in front of a jury because you're basically saying that safety was not a factor. What are you advising clients right now that run a freight broker that they can do to best protect themselves and send a message to a potential jury, hey, we're doing everything in our power to ensure safety?
Yeah, number one, take a look, make sure, of course, that they have a satisfactory rating. I think folks would be loath to get a conditional rating, particularly on the heels of Montgomery and the facts in there. Number two, I think you focus on the unsafe driving and the crash data. Number three, work with a consistent group of carriers you're going to work with, and you're going to know in terms of what their processes are so that you can assign the freight to them. There are private resources out there that can give you information about the carriers, rank them. It's not the be-all, end-all, but it gives you something to hang your hat on. Well, like I said, you, if you're a broker, you have got to think today, if I'm in front of that jury, what would I want to present, and create it today. What you do before the accident, that's evidence. What you do afterwards, that's backfill.
Now, what do you advise them? I mean, the sort of one-on-one, I know, Julie, we talked about this when you're in trucking. Don't put things in writing that you don't want to be seen. I mean, this is sort of classic 101 HR / sort of legal advice, is like, be very careful. And I can only imagine now Pandora's box of these broker emails are just going to be absolutely a nightmare for some compliance departments.
Yeah, don't fire these things off without thinking. It's almost like when the call comes in for a big accident. My thought is take the most basic facts: where, when, what are we dealing with? That's it. Because otherwise, that is cast in concrete, and you're stuck with it for the rest of the case. Any email you send out, you've got to consider that's going to be put onto a projection screen in front of a jury. You've got to come back and think about that and be very judicious in what you talk about, what you put out.
I mean,
It used to be don't say anything or don't write anything you wouldn't want on the front page of the newspaper. Well, I guess nowadays, if you wouldn't want it on the front page of the of one of the websites, or even worse, on a projector in a courtroom.
yeah, FreightWaves.com, you don't want to be on the front of there. What is the old, what is it, 6-page, or what's the one? Page 6. Don't do anything wrong if you don't want to be featured. We feature good things, by the way, Doug. Like, not just drama, but the freight bro culture, I think, is going to be a problem, because I think a lot of times I've seen this happen where like a smart ass email goes out internally because you're like, this is ridiculous. And you make something in context that feels really not damning, but all of a sudden it gets played in front of a jury and it just opens up Pandora box. You got to be careful. Seems like a lot of compliance stuff. Doug, we got to have you back, because you're going to provide a lot of context for this. Really enjoyed that conversation. We could talk to Doug. Doug is an amazing resource. Doug, thank you for coming on. We're gonna bring you back. He's gonna be a very busy man. By the way, this is our gift to our viewers: free, non-billable hours of great legal advice. And next up, we're gonna talk compliance. We're not breaking today. We have such an amazing show today. We're gonna keep riffing through things. Jordan Graft is the founder of Highway, probably the most impactful founder to come out of the last decade in terms of freight. Jordan, welcome to FreightWaves Today.
And hey, Craig, Julie, thank you for having me. That's quite an intro. Thank you, Craig. You used to call me the Steve Martin of FreightWaves. Now it's a little bit more complimentary intro.
Well, it is definitely. The reason I called you Steve Martin is because you were a returning guest, I think, at one point, like a dozen times when I was doing. You were really the Steve Martin of Fuller Speed Ahead, which was my sort of podcast. But Jordan, we have been apart. Watch you build Highway. Congratulations, you guys secured one of the biggest exits, and you're not exiting, but one of the biggest liquidity events in freight venture history. A lot of companies have gotten huge valuations. Jordan actually decided to take some money off the table. I applaud you for that. That's real smart. Your investors appreciate that. Jordan, but let's get into it. SCOTUS is a big deal. Lots happening. What are you seeing right now in terms of where Highway's positioned itself? Also, I want to hear about fraud.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously you had a very talented and experienced attorney just speaking about the impact of freight brokers. But obviously what we told freight brokers is preemption's gone. The Supreme Court made it clear that you need a safety standard as a part of your vetting process. And so we've been working with brokers on making sure that they have availability to the rules that they need to create based on what their insurance company or their legal counsel is suggesting. And the third thing is you got to have an auditable process that you can produce, not only for discovering a legal case or a legal matter, but also demonstrating, hey, we have a regularly scheduled audit and we are auditing our hiring decisions and making sure that we are following our protocols and standards. So those are the three things that we talk to customers about.
I imagine one of the things I've heard as we've talked to a number of attorneys over the last couple of weeks is demonstrating a process for why you selected a carrier is important, and not deviating from that process. And I think that's challenging for a lot of freight brokers where they may have overridden a Highway system or some internal process. Now that the decision around overriding becomes a lot more in scope, how are you guys advising clients around that particular element?
Yeah, so the first principle we talk about in this topic with customers is we say, just because something bad didn't happen doesn't mean you didn't create risk. And so just because the hiring decision you made for this load for that carrier, something bad didn't happen doesn't mean that risk wasn't introduced into your ecosystem. And so trying to help freight brokers now think in a risk mindset, much like banks and insurance companies think about the world. And each transaction has a certain amount of risk, and how to quantify that and how to decide what your tolerance is. Obviously, we really focused on the fraud elements and still are, but the safety has risen, and we've seen brokers responding as they should, and they're being responsible, and they're taking the Supreme Court decision seriously, and they're introducing safety standards We're increasing the safety standards, the number of safety standards they have in their hiring process. And we've seen less overrides. We're seeing less brokers making decisions to override on a per load basis. And, that's definitely a byproduct of the Supreme Court ruling. Now, the consequence of that, so there's always a consequence. There's always a trade-off in every decision or new policy. The consequence is it's going to be harder for smaller and newer carrier authority entities to get freight. It just is. They have less track record. They have less safety data. They represent a greater risk just because of the absence of information. And the absence of information, you have to assume they're one of the higher risk profiles for that entity. And so this will have a consequence where there will be less opportunities for smaller carriers, in my opinion, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. Jordan, when it comes to fraud, where are brokers most vulnerable right now?
Yeah, that's a great question, Julie. So right now, I would say the fraud vectors have shifted from fleet level compliance to the process. And the bad actors are focused on injecting themselves through impersonation or hijacking credentials of carrier inboxes or phone systems to be able to impersonate a carrier during the point of tendering or pickup. And so it's moved from I'm trying to pretend to be a carrier that's real and out there to now like I'm actually trying to hijack it at the moment that the transaction is being executed. And the defense against that is the industry is having to evolve and not communicating over unencrypted, unsecured channels like email with sensitive and documents, and having a higher level of awareness of things like a rate confirmation or a pickup number are really sensitive data points, and those need to be sent in a secure manner.
Jordan,
Email and WhatsApp are not secure.
Jordan, the double brokering thing is obviously probably one of the OG fraud platforms or ways that fraud is being propagated in this industry. What are some of the emerging things that you're seeing that really concern you?
Yeah. Well, the safety, the SCOTUS ruling is what has a lot of our attention right now and helping our customers respond to that. And I would say that's probably 40, 50% of our mind share right now in product roadmap is like thinking about how to respond to customers' needs. Basically, it's primarily coming from the insurance markets. A lot of brokers that, maybe renewed their policy 3 months ago, they're fine. But those that are in the process of renewal are getting different and new mandates from their insurance underwriters or agents about what they have to do around safety. So that I would say is a lot of our focus in our product roadmap right now. On the double brokering side, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
There's really two kinds of double brokering. There's double brokering that causes damage, and then there's bad double brokering, right? There's no good double brokering. It's never good, right? It always creates risk into the system. The one that causes financial damage is when the carrier goes unpaid or the load gets stolen, and that's what makes what we do so difficult, because the industry as a whole has tolerated a lot of unauthorized rebrokering for a long time, and we've known about it. It's the worst kept secret in brokered freight. Local driver that's not on the carrier's authority, that's leased on, but not on their insurance, is the one who's actually picking up the load and moving it out. That has happened for a long time, and that gray area that has existed for a long time is what allows this fraud to be so difficult to detect, because you detect a lot of patterns that have been that may be an actual carrier trying to do the right thing, consolidate loads and actually move the loads at a lower cost for the customer, but the behavior pattern matches what we see on the fraud side. So it's always difficult, and the bad actors continually get better, and so we have to continually get better. So I'd say it's a never-ending battle between us and the bad actors to get ahead of whatever vectors that they're trying to use to insert themselves into that process.
Jordan, we got to go. I'm really disappointed we can't spend more time with you. You're going to be back. We got to have you back. But before you go, tell us about Verified by Highway and what that means for clients.
Yeah, so Highway has rolled out a new certification concept where we sit in the brokered freight transaction. There's not just two participants. There's not just a broker and the carrier. There's really an insurance agent, an ELD provider, a factoring company, a dispatch service. There's a lot of different parties that are participating in that transaction. And so Highway's been stepping out and saying and meeting with the leaders in each of those verticals and saying, hey, how do we help you? How can you help us in the industry create rules and standards that help raise the bar for what it means to be a service provider in one of those areas? And just really say, look, this is the data that's coming in from insurance agents, we saw press releases around that, insurance agents, is being used and relied upon by brokers to make hiring decisions. But to date, there's very little that insurance agents are required to stand behind that data. And so we're just separating the insurance agents and saying those that are willing to stand behind the data and those that aren't. And hopefully that what that creates is a reward for those that are willing to say, I have high quality data. The data that I send you that brokers rely upon is valid and people can use it. And so that's the highway certification program that you've been hearing about.
Well, Jordan, thank you so much. We're moving from one of the most impactful venture startup founders to probably the most impactful, I would say, the GOAT of transportation. And he's going to talk about being what it takes to build multiple billion-dollar companies. This is the best value in freight, by the way. There's no double brokering. We have the one and only Brad Jacobs, the author of How to Make a Few More Billion, because he talked about how to make a few billion. We're going to hear from Brad Jacobs right after our break.
Race car drivers like NASCAR champion Jesse Love are a lot like commercial drivers, pros. But even the best in the world still watch the tape to see what they missed and get better next time. So we created the Samsara driving coach.
Great race, Jesse, but you were following too closely and you were speeding.
Okay, you got me on that one.
Samsara uses insights from millions of professional drivers to coach drivers in real time.
Because even champions need a coach.
Give me the keys.
What's the masterclass all about? Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you're a driver, you're an owner-operator, you're a fleet owner, whether you're in compliance services, dispatcher, no matter what it is, masterclass is for you. Every 2 weeks, you're going to sit down with me and we're going to go over certain business topics that are related specifically to your small trucking company operations. We're going to help you with everything from compliance to how to negotiate better on the spot board, how to find direct freight, and everything in between. This is the reason why you don't want to miss out on Masterclass. It's about an hour to an hour and a half, and then on top of that, you'll have the library to you so that way you can always research and reflect back onto it. Don't miss out this opportunity. This is built specifically for you. I'm excited and I hope to see you in class.
Imagine a world where your freight moves as fast as a digital pulse. What if your visibility didn't just tell you where a truck was, but exactly where it needed to be 48 hours from now? Think of a logistics network that corrects its own mistakes before they cost you a single dime. What if your supply chain could think for itself? Imagine AI agents negotiating rates in milliseconds, predictive models that solve labor shortages before they even happen. This isn't science fiction, it's the agenda. On July 15th at the historic Old Post Office in Chicago, FreightWaves presents the Supply Chain AI Symposium. We are defining in real time how AI is embedded into every mile, every warehouse, and every handshake. Because in 2026, the future isn't just coming, it's already negotiating. The FreightWaves Supply Chain AI Symposium. Secure your spot now.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Today. Man, we have a packed show. The best is yet to come. We have Brad Jacobs, the author of How to Make a Few Billion Dollars, a few more $1 billion, but you also wrote the first book. Brad, tell us, what is the secret to making a few $1 billion?
Is having good relationships with powerful people like you, Craig.
Well, we're gonna clip that one and put that as a permanent record for FreightWaves Today. We're so happy to have you. Brad, you built 8 companies worth more than $1 billion, which is very remarkable. It may be the best run in business history, certainly the best in the industries that you're involved in. Is there something, I've read both your books. I'd love for our audience to sort of boil down. You have a playbook that you like to talk about on really how you sort of exercise both business but also life. Is there a couple of sort of core points that you have that really drive your decision making?
Yeah, there is. So my approach to business starts here. It starts with your mindset. It starts with figuring out how you get in the zone and how do you stay in the zone when you get kicked out of the zone. I have 2 chapters in the second book all about that. I think it's really important. I think the most important thing to succeed in business in a big way is to keep your head in a good place, because there's always stuff coming in. There's incoming missiles all day long, all year long. You got to stay cool, and you got to think very rationally and very intelligently with some wisdom and some big picture and long-term thinking. So that's where it starts. It starts in the mind. Now, in terms of my particular way I've applied the toolkit to the business is through M&A and then integrating and optimizing the businesses I've bought. That's what I did in all my companies, and that's what I'm doing here. So first of all, finding good companies to buy, but good companies that can be even better, and then improving them, and largely with technology and removing a lot of inefficiencies and a lot of waste, and also paying attention to the human quality of the people of the organization, making sure everyone's happy, make sure they're very engaged, make sure they bleed the color of the company. The mindset is very, very important, collectively and individually.
One of the things that I think you talk about is rearranging your brain. And what I love about your books is, again, it's not just about business. This is not just a business biography, but it's really a playbook for everything in someone's life, their family life, how they think about decisions. We live in a very noisy environment, particularly in the industries that we cover, which is the goods economy and freight. There's a lot of noise out there, Brad. How does someone really hone in? You've talked about meditation being a core part of your life, but how does someone really get started in rearranging their brain?
I think it's a different answer for every person, and only each person can answer that for themselves. And the only way they figure that out is through trial and error. You got to experiment. You got to find some me time, find some time for yourself, all by yourself, and just figure out what works for you, what gets you into a calm state of mind. For some people, that's prayer. Some people, that's meditation. Some people, that's some physical exercise. It's different for different folks. For some people, it's complex thought experiments. For some people, it's feeling love and gratitude and those kind of things. So I think it's different for each person, but it's important you find out what that is and then do a lot of that. And then the second thing that is important is you're not going to enter some nirvana state and like be in bliss all the time. It's not realistic. You're going to get thrown off now and then. How do you detect that? How do you sense that? And then how do you come back to the center? And again, that's different for different people. For me, I did a couple of years of cognitive therapy back in like 20 years ago. And I still remember all the things they told me. I remember all the tools and the techniques and the little psychological tricks they gave me. That works great for me.
Well, I clearly am going to need to read this book and figure out
It's
how
amazing.
to
He's got
get
two of them, by
my
the way.
life in order.
There's the first one and there's the sequel that just
balance
came
work
out.
and life a little better. But yes, all right. Well, I'll add that to my very short list of things to do.
You know, Julie, you can only read one of them. Read the second one. Read the green one. The first one, I was still learning how to write a book. The second book, I was getting in my mojo.
You mentioned looking for good companies that could be great and creating efficiencies and leaning in on technology. Can you talk a little bit more about that, the role of AI and how the technology platforms you guys use at QXO help as you acquire those other companies?
Well, AI and robotics, automation, collectively, is the biggest trend ever. And in the book, I talk about the 108 most consequential inventions, tools that humans have created. And I call that technology because that's what it is. Technology is outsourcing things we do ourselves so we can do it better. And starting 2.8 million years ago with stone tools that was able to eat better and be able to fight better and survive better. And then I trace all the way up till last 25 years when there was a huge amount of inventions, culminating with the internet, and now with AI, the LLMs, and all the robotics, all the humanoid robotics and the other forms of automation that you see in the industrial world. This is taking to us a whole new level. So the speed of change, the speed of progress is accelerating in a big, big, big way. And the consequences for humanity is very, very significant. So yes, AI is going to affect everything that we do in our business. It's going to affect pricing. It's going to affect procurement. It's going to affect transportation. It's going to logistics, the warehousing of it. It's going to do everything with workforce planning. It's really, there's no part of the business that AI is not going to touch and improve. It's all for the positive.
Brad, you're one of the most optimistic people that I know, and I think that's probably driven so much of your success as you look at the opportunities. You're also a very quick study of a business, and you've talked about the M&A playbook, is sort of vetting out what is legitimate and what is not. Tell us a little bit about how you sort of vet the deals that are what they say they are versus the one. There's so many deals out there. Most of them don't make sense. How do you really filter out the ones that are going to have the best outcomes?
You got to study it real closely, and you can't buy a pig in the poke. You really have to understand and know what you're buying before you buy it. You can't get hustled in some kind of a investment banker process where you get a 4-hour management presentation in a data room, and even the management presentation, they're just saying what the script says. I've never bought a company like that because I don't know I wouldn't know what I'd be buying. I don't know how that would work. So you have to really study it carefully, very deeply, and understand. And you have to talk to its customers and its vendors and the employees, particularly the former employees, its competitors. You got to search all of social media and see what's out there. You can find tons and tons of stuff about a company just surfing around social media. So I think in this day and age, when information is so wide, so all over everywhere, you should know what you're buying. If you don't, it's your own fault.
Yeah, I think especially with things like Claude or whatever LLM you're using, it makes it so much easier to do research because it can consolidate those feedbacks, those social media posts that make it a lot easier. So there's really fewer and fewer excuses, as you mentioned, to sort of know that. But then how do you sort of filter? What's the primary filtering mechanism? Is it talent? Is it unit economics? Is it market? How do you think about what is the single most important thing that you're focused on as a business decision when you go to look at M&A transactions?
It's not a single thing, it's a group of things. But first and foremost is, how does this company make money? Like, what do you have to believe in order to believe this company is going to get better and better over time? So one of the reasons I picked building products distribution is I really do believe that in 5 years and in 10 years from now, there's going to be a lot more demand for building products than there is right now. You got population growth, the industry is underbuilt. There's a 4 million unit shortage of housing. The buildings that are out there, both commercial and residential, very old, 40, 50, 60 years old. That's old. They got to get replaced. They got to get remodeled. They got to get upgraded. So you want to get into an industry and a company that's levered to some growth trend, so that even if you mess some stuff up, the trend's in your favor. You got tailwinds propelling you, so that you have pricing growth, you have volume growth, you have margin expansion opportunities. That's what you want to see. So the overall picture is number one. Now, second thing is the company itself. How is it positioned? What are its strengths and weaknesses versus the competition? What makes it a winning company? And what opportunities are there to grow it more? What are they underinvesting in? A lot of times you can buy a company from private equity and they have a short time frame, so they're not really investing in the business. And you take that business off their hands and you invest in the CapEx, you invest in the technology, you invest in the people, and you staff it right, and invest in the facilities, and suddenly it's a lot more profitable with higher margins and generate a lot more free cash flow. So what's going to make that business better? But it usually comes down to what's going to affect price and what's going to affect volume. Those are the two big ones. If you can win in the marketplace on price and volume, you're going to make a lot of money. And in order to do that, you have to have a strong value prop to the customers. The customers are those folks who wire money into your bank account. They're very important. So you have to understand, why are the customers doing business with that company? And then, is there a way to elevate the customer experience so that the customer sees experience as a breath of fresh air dealing with you and gives you more business? And you see that's what happened in transportation. In LTL, Old Dominion was the first one to crack that nut like 20 years ago. They got a superior, differentiated quality of service, and therefore they got better volume. They could pick which freight they wanted, and they got better pricing too. Now XPO has caught up with them, and so they got a little competition, but there's plenty of business to go around. And that's why. The reason XPO has been outperforming so much is because at core, the most important reason is they elevated the customer experience, elevated fewer damages, more on time. And as a result of that, by focusing on the customer experience, they got more price, they got more volume. Therefore, you make more money.
Brad, I think one of the most important things that you said is pick the industry. And of course, as a media executive, one of the sort of qualifiers is don't pick industries that are going to be disrupted by AI. Media, unfortunately, is on the wrong end of that. You and I have talked about some media transactions. It is a very difficult business. What do you do? What advice would you give someone like myself who has media businesses that are being disrupted by AI? How do we position ourselves to sort of take advantage of this massive disruptive opportunity?
First of all, you mentioned Claude. Ask Claude. Claude's smarter than I am. But I would say, little old Brad would say, think about how you can morph your business, migrate your business from non-AI to all AI. Figure out every part of every work stream you have in the business. How can you use AI for that? How can you use AI instead of the old conventional way of doing that? And if the answer to that is I can't, the outlook may not be too good. But the answer is probably you can. And as you delve into all the different elements of your business, start using AI, you get ahead of the curve here.
Yeah, it's a lightning rod for media businesses for sure. So that's a cultural challenge of getting the right people who want to embrace the technology and see it as an opportunity. Media companies have notoriously just stubbornly sort of resist the old guard. We saw that with the internet. Certain media companies have done really well. I want to get into freight because this is what our audience cares about. Brad, you built some of the most successful freight companies. We had Drew from RXO on Friday that talked about the state of the market. Got to ask, when you entered the picture with the acquisition of Express One, over a decade ago, what assumptions did you make about freight that didn't prove to be correct? And I'd love to hear on the other end, what assumptions did prove to be correct?
So I remember 2011, when I was first getting into the industry, I bought Express One, which is where the XPO came from, Express One. And I was on a panel at NASDAQ, the manufacturing trade group, with Shelley Simpson, JB Hunt, and I can't remember the name of the woman from Panther, the expedite company. And someone in the audience asked me, so what do you think the future of the industry is? And I said, this is going to be eventually automated. And all trucking is going to be autonomous. The relationship between either the trucks or either the trucking companies or the 3PLs is going to be electronic with the shippers, no human intervention. And everything from the intermediary to the end customer, the consumer, is going to be all electronic, all machine to machine, and there'll be very little human interaction. And the audience was like, I mean, they're just stunned. They thought that was like, what are you talking about? Like, didn't make any sense whatsoever to them. Now, turns out that was the answer to both your questions, Craig, because it turned out it definitely is the correct prediction. I may have gotten the timing wrong. I thought it would have happened by now in a much more advanced way, but it's happening.
Yeah, it certainly is with AI. It does feel like, a lot of the digitization. I think this is sort of the typical, what they call the Gartner hype cycle, is people underestimate how long it's going to take, but also underestimate the long-term impacts. We're starting to see this come together. In terms of the businesses that you have built, XPO, RXO, GXO, which of those businesses do you think is best positioned to take advantage of the AI revolution that's taking place across freight?
Well, I think AI is going to affect all three of them. So on brokerage, RXO, Robinson, Echo, all the brokers, they're already using AI. They're using AI for matching, but that's been going on for a long time. Even when RXO was part of XPO, we had Mario created this freight matching, freight optimizer, and we did automatic matching on that. And it was real e-commerce. It wasn't human intervention. So, I mean, that trend is continuing. And I think it'll bring efficiency. It'll bring more and more precision in order to find just exactly the right truck that's exactly where you need it in order to take a backhaul, do it cheapest. I think that's going to be a real big improvement in the business. And everything from matching it to dispatching it to invoicing it, it's all going to be AI. All the agents will do that without human intervention over time. I think on the LTL side, Mario's using AI. He's using AI on the pricing, using AI on the line haul, using AI on the end, the pickup and delivery in the end, the P&D, using it to do the workforce automation on the dock. So I mean, they're already using AI. They'll just use AI more. Eventually, the trucks, even LTL trucks, will be autonomous, and they'll be even picking up will be autonomous, and then the travel to the cross dock will be autonomous. Everything in the cross dock will be autonomous, and then the out line haul and the final delivery will all be autonomous. It'll all be AI powered automation. And I think on the GXO side, GXO has been using AI for years. We never had a warehouse that wasn't powered by an AI system. It was way too. We had big warehouses. No human being could keep in mind all those SKUs and where everything was. So when goods came in, they were scanned right away in the WMX, the warehouse management system, and then the system told you where to slot it. If it's a fast-moving item, put it near the exit. If it's something that goes out with a fast-moving item, put it near the exit. If it's a slow-moving item, put it way in the back of the warehouse, up real high. So the AI has been already introduced in the warehouse. And if you go to the most automated GXO logistics warehouses, not a lot of people there. There's a lot of robots and computers. That's where it's going. I mean, that's all where it's going. So I don't think one of those three will be more or less affected by AI than the other. They're all going to, because that's the mega trend. It's the biggest trend since humanity was born, in my opinion.
Wow. Biggest trend since humanity was born.
I mean, Brad always has the great outtakes on the technology and future.
All right, so shifting momentarily from technology, I want to get your take on the market. Obviously, LTL and truckload markets have an impact on your distribution and sourcing that capacity available. What do you think the rest of 2026 and maybe even into early 2027 looks like?
You know, usually I have a real strong view with high conviction. I don't right now. The reason I don't right now is there's a few imponderables that aren't determined yet. What's going to happen with interest rates? Are they going up or going down? I mean, at the moment, people think they're going up. A couple of months ago, they thought they were coming down. What's going to happen with the Iranian thing? Is the war over? Is it finished over? Or is it going to be temporarily over and start again? And therefore, what's going to happen to fuel prices? What's going to happen to demand? Is demand going to be created or is demand going to be destroyed? So there's a lot of unknowns right now. There's a lot of question marks. So I really don't know. I don't have a strong view. I could make an argument for both ways. Now, long term, I'm bullish on transportation. I think we've been in a freight recession for a long time, like a real long time, many years. I remember a few months ago, one of our women in the FP&A department subscribes to Sonar, and she came into my office and said, "Look, Sonar's calling a change in the market, and freight rate's going to start going up." I said, "Okay, that's great." I didn't do anything about it. I should have capitalized that and made a trade or something, because obviously it turned out to be totally correct. And boom, markets really turned. So you do see rates going up sharply, but it's not from more demand. It's from less supply. So I don't know what to take away from that. I don't know what the inference is. Is that sustainable? Maybe. But what you really need for a bull market is you need the economy to be booming. You need more goods moving around. You need more freight. And we're not quite there yet. We might be at an inflection point. It's possible we're at an inflection point, but for me, it's a little too early to call that.
Yeah, Brad, it's funny you say that. There are some short sellers out there that were on X that were talking about some of the businesses that you're involved in. And they kept arguing, and I kept saying, hey, this market is starting to rip. We're seeing it. And they were really mad because they thought, hey, we have something other than just looking at the data. And I kept telling them, I was like, look, you're the wrong position. You're the wrong side of this. There's so much operating leverage that happens in these industries when you see the market change. Pricing improves, but also utilization significantly improves. And we've seen that with the stock prices of both XPO and RXO over recent months, just how much better these businesses are performing and how much better sentiment is going forward due to the change of the market conditions.
Yeah, you mentioned the short sellers. I made a career out of squeezing the short sellers. Short sellers hate me. They always lose money with me. But, they play a good role in the market because they test people's thoughts and they put some things into the conversation that you double check and reality check it. But generally speaking, most stocks over time are going to go up because there's more and more business demand. And so even the companies that aren't really well run, they go up too. They just don't go up as much. So I think generally speaking, if you want to play the market, you're better off playing it from the long side.
Yeah, and look, I think, getting on the wrong side of the business in terms of data, the wrong side of the market development, and I would argue the wrong side of Sonar, for those, you're brave to do that because the data doesn't lie. When the market shifts, it puts you at risk if you're on the wrong side of that trade. Brad, I got to ask, you have moved into building materials from logistics. These are two very difficult businesses. Earlier in the show, I teased the fact my brother's now building homes. I teased the fact that he says that building homes is easier than running a public trucking company. What is your view on those two industries?
There's more commonality than you'd think. So our customers are home builders, they're general contractors, they're tradespeople, they're roofers, they're people do waterproofing, and they buy a lot of building materials. I mean, tons of building materials. And now what I've done in the last year is, a year ago I didn't have any revenue, let alone profit in building products, but we did two acquisitions, and we got another one that we're trying to close the next few weeks. And between the three of them, we'll be up to about 18 billion of revenue, be up to about 2 billion of EBITDA, and we'll be number one in insulation, both distribution and the installation of insulation, number two in roofing, number one in waterproofing, number one or number two in lumber in certain key geographies. And we'll have about 28,000 employees and 1,150 locations. We'll be in all 50 states, 7 Canadian provinces. I got a fleet over 10,000 vehicles. So I got trucks again, managing trucks. It's a very interesting business. But all these businesses, whether it's trucking or logistics or whether it's all these things, it's the same job. I mean, I was sitting at the same desk running all those businesses in the past, right here, right where I am right now in Greenwich. It's the same thing. You're dealing with people, you're dealing with employees, and you want to get them all charged up and excited and loyal and hardworking and really put their heart and soul into the business, very productive. You're dealing with customers, and you got to please them and make them happy, and you got to show them that you love them. And you're dealing with vendors, and you got to figure out what you can do with those vendors in order to get a better price, get a better deal. You're dealing with shareholders, and you got to figure out, how do I create shareholder value so the stock price goes up? It's pretty much the same kind of stuff. And you deal with tech. You deal a lot with tech. Tech. We're revamping the entire tech stack of the two companies we bought, and we'll do the same thing with the one that we're about to buy. Everything, from the ERP to the CRM to the e-commerce, to the WMS, the TMS, the HRS, everything. Every single part of the tech stack, putting in hundreds of millions of dollars to upgrade them, because there's a huge ROI from that. I remember in the early days of XPO, and we invested hundreds of millions into the technology. And people said, are you crazy? Like, you don't have the revenue, the profits to support that. And I said, no, we have to do this. This is something that's not like a nice to have. This is something we must have. We're going to build a big company with billions and billions of dollars of revenue, and we need the technology to support all that. And it turned out it worked out.
Yeah, congratulations. I got to imagine your logistics pedigree, the experience you had in the business of understanding supply chain logistics, has been tremendous for building QXO and a building materials industry, which is a lot about supply chain.
Oh, it's very relevant. So most distributors, they let the manufacturers do the trucking. So they buy at CIF, the warehouse. Well, I don't want to do that because they mark up the freight and they don't show up on time. So I'm trying to renegotiate with the manufacturers one by one so that we buy the goods FOB their factory and we do the transportation. So that's a big deal. The other part of logistics that's very helpful here is warehouse management. So this industry is sophisticated in some ways, but in technology, it's way, way, way behind transportation and logistics. There's no comparison. So most warehouses in this industry don't even scan and barcode goods. So there's no WMS system. So the inventory is all FUBAR. So there's a lot of things you can do with technology that's like just table stakes, basic stuff in transportation that this industry doesn't have yet.
Oh, Brad, thank you so much. We've got to go to break. Man, that was amazing. Brad, thank you so much Please come back. We'd love to have you as you build up your enterprise and get closer to that $50 to $100 billion. Maybe that's the new horizon for you. So congratulations. So much attention, Julie, has been focused on Elon Musk, rightfully so, building, becoming the first trillionaire. But people like Brad Jacobs have been so impactful to industries that are often underappreciated and perhaps underloved. He sees opportunity in those.
Yeah, amazing story, and really thank you for sharing so much of your insight with us.
And that's why he is the GOAT. Brad, thank you so much. We'll have to have you back.
Thank you. All the best.
So next up, we've got Seth Holm to talk about public markets and what he's seen in the freight business and freight stocks. That's coming up right after these messages.
Race car drivers like NASCAR champion Jesse Love are a lot like commercial drivers, pros. But even the best in the world still watch the tape to see what they missed and get better next time. So we created the Samsara driving coach.
Great race, Jesse, but you were following too closely and you were speeding.
Okay, you got me on that one.
Samsara uses insights from millions of professional drivers to coach drivers in real time.
Because even champions need a coach.
Give me the keys.
The map is changing. As global uncertainties rise, the future of the supply chain is moving closer to home. Welcome to the new coast-to-coast North American network. Driven by massive reshoring trends and next-gen industrial innovation, optimized by AI workflows that build unshakable operational resilience, and locked down by proactive security against evolving freight fraud. Are you ready to navigate the shift? Join the industry's top minds to build the future. The FreightWaves Domestic Supply Chain Summit. Streaming live June 17th. Register for free at live.freightwaves.com.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Today. Julie, I got to tell you, for those that are interested in hearing more on Brad's insights, are you going to read this?
Yeah, this weekend.
It is amazing insights into business life. He talks about these inventions being really how transformative they are. And he would argue, Brad would argue, that AI is the most transformative business. In fact, one of his sort of comments about business acquisitions is avoid industries that are going to get massively disrupted by AI. He's argued, look, I think he's right, to embrace the technology, particularly for media companies. So something to think about that you're able to take advantage of it. We're going to get into sonar data and talk about what we're seeing in the market. Going to happen. It's June 15th, Monday morning. We are getting resolution in the Iran conflict. Hormuz is going to be open for free flow of traffic. That's going to take a lot of really pressure off of the oil markets, and oil markets are already pricing that in. Brent has dropped to $83 a barrel. It was, as high as $120 a barrel at the peak of hostilities. WTI, which is the U.S. crude price, $115, and that's down to $80 a barrel. This is providing some relief. And we've seen really diesel prices drop over the last couple of weeks as hostilities have largely ended, even though there hasn't been a peace deal. Looks like we're getting that, and that's what's really taking pressure out of the oil markets. The future curve has been priced in much cheaper oil prices for some time now, but now we're seeing it really show up in the market. We're $80 a barrel in WTI. Diesel prices have dropped really over the last couple of weeks by as much as 50 cents a gallon. That translates to about 7 cents per mile for motor carriers. So they have been getting the price of diesel on retail prices have been cheaper. That is lowering the fuel surcharge as well that shippers have been paying. It's been providing some level of relief in this very tight market. But it really, interesting enough, is not lowering the price of trucking spot rates. We've talked about the fact that these are really independent variables. The price of diesel does factor into how motor carriers think about their costs, but ultimately the clearing price is what is important. And therefore, we're seeing the price of diesel drop. Wholesale diesel is down almost $1 a gallon from where it was at the sort of the peak of the market. And so retail has only dropped a smaller portion of that, about half of that. Wholesale has dropped over $1 a gallon. It will continue to come down over the next couple of days as the lower price of oil gets priced into the cost of diesel and factored in. And that will provide savings to both shippers that are paying fuel surcharges as well as carriers that are buying fuel either in the wholesale cost plus arrangements or on retail. All of this is important to say that these high spot rates that motor carriers are enjoying and brokers are paying and shippers are sort of feeling some pain is unlikely to change. In fact, the variables that we really look at to indicate price in the market is the capacity tightening or is it loosening? And we use tender rejections for that information. 17% in terms of OTRI, which is the outbound tender rejection index, tells us just how tight the market is. At 17%, that means that really 1 out of every 5 truckloads is being turned down. And although we've seen it cool off slightly, and I mean slightly, got as high as 17.5%, it's cooled off slightly, enough to provide a level of relief, no real relief in terms of long-term sentiment of the market, but enough to not have accelerating continued increases in spot rates. And of course, spot rates do stay near all-time highs. And when you look at the cost of diesel coming down, spot rates at all-time highs or near all-time highs, it just tells us that motor carriers are in a fantastic position, perhaps Goldilocks, because they're getting cheaper costs for diesel, a cost that they sort of bear, with spot rates that are near that all-time high market. And when we look at sentiment going forward, there's no reason to think that spot rates are going to drop along with diesel. It's going to stay high and persistent, particularly as we go into the last couple of weeks of the quarter and head into that July 4th period where we tend to see rejection rates really accelerate and spot rates follow in tandem. Again, we look at tender rejection rates because they lead spot rates by at least a couple of weeks. It tells us as tender rejections go up, spot rates will follow, and then ultimately contract rates will also follow. And we're going to see that. And look, contract rates, as we've heard consistently on FreightWaves Today over the last couple of weeks, are expected to see substantial or sizable increases over the next year as capacity continues to tighten and the freight market continues to cook. When we look specific at markets, I think it's really important to know that not a lot has changed from our update on Friday. We look at the blue markets. We have a term blue to blue. You can get the Sonar app inside the App Store. And again, even if you have other rate data products, it's always good to get a second opinion. The Sonar blue to blue app is $10 a month. Just think about that. That's one load if you price it better, if you're able to maximize your price with a higher rate, just to know you're not leaving money on the table, or if you're buying capacity to do it. Now, every rate product has advantages and every rate product has disadvantages. The high frequency nature of Sonar's data means that it's really reflecting what's happening right now. It's picking up those changes in the market that happen really quickly, which in a heating market, in a market that's tightening as fast and moving as fast as this one is, it's really important. But we look specific at markets. Again, we want to stay focused on the blue markets. And so when we look here at blue to blue, the strongest market in the country is actually central and southern Indiana. You can see that going down, that extends down through Kentucky, Louisville and actually into Nashville. That market right there is the strongest. And you could even say that Chicago metro area, really just south of the core part of the city, but in that Joliet area, just south of Chicago, that is a real strong market. It's real tight. It's real strong. And again, the deeper the blue, the better the conditions are. We want to avoid west of I-35 because that's really not a great market right now. It was cooking, but it's actually looks like there are, if it's red, it means there are more trucks than there are loads, and you're likely to deadhead out of those markets to get freight. And so when we look at that I-35, it's still pretty red. Avoid Florida. Avoid the Northeast. There just isn't great conditions. When we move out west, Southern California looks strong, and that Ontario, San Bernardino, that basically the Inland Empire looks to be okay for freight. But this is an interesting map because it's kind of got a lot of more red than we would like to see, but it does tell you that certain markets are absolutely doing well, while other markets, and this is probably what freight brokers are seeing, is they're able to make more and higher margins on certain markets than they are in others. And it's all based on the supply and demand. How desperate are trucks needing to get out of those markets?
So potential resolution in the Iran conflict means oil prices cooling off a little bit, taking a little pressure off of that market. Spot rates remain high.
Yep, near highs. They're all
as diesel prices will continue to fall. I've said it before and I'll say it again. It's not supply. It's not cost-based pricing. It's supply and demand. So
Yep.
I believe that if the market remains how it is, spot rates will remain strong, even if the fuel prices continue to fall.
Correct. Yeah, and I mean, we've seen diesel prices drop on retail by about 7 miles per gallon, which is direct in the pockets of carriers for those that are buying on retail. Wholesale is down about twice that, almost $1 a gallon since diesel prices peaked. That's rack if you're on a rack cost plus. By the way, if you're a motor carrier, you should absolutely be buying your fuel on rack on cost plus arrangements, because when fuel prices shoot up, the truck stops take those rates up really quickly, those pump prices up quickly, and they're sort of reluctant. I think somebody described it as a rocket on the way up and a feather on the way down. I think it's a great quote because that's exactly what you see. So buying your fuel on cost plus arrangements is the best way to go because you can mitigate your exposure to those high surges.
Yeah, especially because your fuel surcharge that you should be getting from your shippers, if you are contractual, is only going to update weekly, and that's going to move a lot
That's
more
right.
quickly.
And
so
fuel prices, particularly wholesale updates, really within 24 hours. And one of the nice things is with sonar data, you can actually tell, and I've learned this by having these you call them debates about wholesale fuel. Sonar's data actually updates a day before a lot of the fuel cards. RXO puts out a map for the next day. And actually what's interesting is that Sonar's data is picking up the next day. So it's been like, I'm seeing stuff 24 hours in advance of what the fuel cards do it, because that's just the high frequency nature of the data sees it. And I think it's really interesting. So you can sort of predict where fuel is going to be 24 hours, at least on wholesale. And then of course, retail markets just take a while. Before we get to break, we're going to go break in just a second. Next up, we'll get Seth Holm at Westbrook Capital. Brad Jacobs talked about writing a book. I wrote a book too, by the way. It's incredibly painful. I don't recommend it. It was a lot of work. I've actually written a second one. Once you get into it, Brad talked about how his second book is better than his first. I agree. When you've never written a book, it's called Moving the World. You can get it on Amazon. It's really a sort of compilation historical on how we got here in modern supply chains. You can find it on Amazon. It's called Moving the World. It's something I wrote, and do not recommend writing a book. But if you do write a book, your second one is probably better than your first.
Yeah, I have read it and I enjoyed it very much. So looking forward to the next. All right, we're going to hear a word from our sponsor, Samsara, and then a quick break, and we'll be right back.
It's National Safety Month, which makes this a great time to ask how your fleet can prevent more accidents. Samsara AI detects risks in real time, giving teams more visibility into what's happening on the road and more context to coach drivers before risky moments become incidents. Fleets using Samsara Complete AI Safety Solution have reduced crash rates by nearly 75%. See the data behind the results in the Samsara Safety Report at samsara.com/freightwaves.
Race car drivers like NASCAR champion Jesse Love are a lot like commercial drivers, pros. But even the best in the world still watch the tape to see what they missed and get better next time. So we created the Samsara driving coach.
Great race, Jesse, but you were following too closely and you were speeding.
Okay, you got me on that one.
Samsara uses insights from millions of professional drivers to coach drivers in real time.
Because even champions need a coach.
Give me the keys.
What's the masterclass all about? Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you're a driver, you're an owner-operator, you're a fleet owner, whether you're in compliance services, dispatcher, no matter what it is, masterclass is for you. Every 2 weeks, you're going to sit down with me and we're going to go over certain business topics that are related specifically to your small trucking company operations. We're going to help you with everything from compliance to how to negotiate better on the spot board, how to find direct freight, and everything in between. This is the reason why you don't want to miss out on Masterclass. It's about an hour to an hour and a half, and then on top of that, you'll have the library to you so that way you can always research and reflect back onto it. Don't miss out this opportunity. This is built specifically for you. I'm excited and I hope to see you in class.
Imagine a world where your freight moves as fast as a digital pulse. What if your visibility didn't just tell you where a truck was, but exactly where it needed to be 48 hours from now? Think of a logistics network that corrects its own mistakes before they cost you a single dime. What if your supply chain could think for itself? Imagine AI agents negotiating rates in milliseconds, predictive models that solve labor shortages before they even happen. This isn't science fiction, it's the agenda. On July 15th at the historic Old Post Office in Chicago, FreightWaves presents the Supply Chain AI Symposium. We are defining in real time how AI is embedded into every mile, every warehouse, and every handshake. Because in 2026, the future isn't just coming, it's already negotiating. The FreightWaves Supply Chain AI Symposium. Secure your spot now.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Today. I am your host, Craig Fuller, with Julie Vandekamp. And in studio today, we have Seth Holm. He is the founder of Westbrow Capital. Westbrow invests specifically in transports. And Seth, as a pure play transport investor, you're one of the largest.
That's right. It's a small pool to pick from, but we are unique. And I think, I'd say the first thing that I know you're excited about, and so am I, is we started at the end of 2021. And so my timing was definitely not the best in starting a transportation fund. So kind of coming out of a 4-year deep freight recession and now having fun for the first time in a while.
Well, you were at Sonar before. You ran our research group here at Sonar and decided to go out and build a fund based on all that great research you did in the day. It's interesting, we've had some fantastic guests on the last couple of weeks. We had Shelley Simpson, and she talked about the fact that she joined, or I shouldn't say joined, she became CEO, I think a month into the freight recession. And Drew Wilkerson also talked about the spinoff of RXO from XPO was really in, I believe it was November of 22, which is sort of the depths of the recession. And they also timed the Coyote purchase sort of at the bottom of the market as well. He would argue that he thought, and I believe as well, that the freight recession was largely over with. Rest in peace, freight recession. Did not work. No. It is a humbling market when you learn how cyclical this is.
That's right. And I thought, when you start up a hedge fund, you really need to build a track record and some credibility. And so I thought, sure, I'll just build a track record and then the assets won't come in anyways. And the market will have recovered by the time they did. And so I think you, me, and everyone else, even the experts in this field, were kind of shocked just how sticky that capacity and the uneconomic side of the non-domiciled CDL type stuff, just how long it lasted. It was brutal. And 50% cost inflation over a 4 or 5 year period. And, for the smaller carriers, your revenue might have been down about the inverse of that. And so it's just been, a long slog. And I think, with the truckload market really beginning to heal, another thing, we invest across not just surface transportation, but anything moving passengers or freight. You get this halo effect as the $1 trillion trucking market recovers. It creates positive umbrella that feeds into everything else that we're doing as well.
I don't think anyone, certainly I didn't, understood how pervasive the immigration story is. We had Tom Albrecht on Friday, where, look, it wasn't on the radar of a lot of people. There was a couple of folks on X that were very vocal about, American Truckers United were very vocal about the immigration story, but it felt at the time more of a fringe perspective. Now it's become mainstream, where they were very active about, hey, this is a problem, this has been a problem. When did you realize, did you start to accept that maybe something else was going on versus, we were all trying to explain how this freight recession went on so long. When was it obvious to you that this was an immigration story?
Really last fall. And, I think at the peak, using sonar data and other data sets, we're not terribly far off. You have, that's the other part about running a sector-specific transport fund. Everybody else has been partying because it's been an AI, tech backdrop. And when I saw trucking volumes down 20% year on year, and I think you have been quoted, Craig, I've watched it every day for the last 7 years, and you guys started the OTVI data set, I believe, in 18 or 17.
That's right.
There's no growth in the trucking volumes in 8 years and down 20% year on year. I knew in the midst of supposedly, at least solid GDP growth and a stock market that was booming, I knew something was wrong. And so I think to your point, we all kind of picked up on it. It is hard on these data sets. I experienced this firsthand when we were writing all the research. The supply side can be tough to nail down because sometimes you've got multiple DOT numbers, you've got people that work part-time, you've got straight trucks, you've got everything else. And so to flesh out exactly, and then 95% of carriers have 6 or fewer trucks, and there's not a lot of transparency into that. And so I think I kind of came around to it last fall. But one thing that kind of hit me over the head, and you guys have probably talked about this, I was listening to the hours of the Wells Fargo Transportation Conference last week, and Jim Filter, who's the CEO in waiting there, I had to do a retake because it hit me like a ton of bricks. He said, there aren't 50,000 carriers in the US that would pass a minimum safety requirement test. They have 14,000 in the database. And I know from my time doing the research, I believe the number's around 500,000 total trucking authorities. Maybe only 50% of those are, actively participating in brokered freight on a regular basis. But if you think about that, that's just a staggering number. We kind of, as we sit right now, and as I'm talking to investors, my base case is 5% of supply is more or less permanently over the next 3 years coming out of the market. And I think you can make a bull case for as much as 20%. And in an industry where every 1% matters tremendously, I think, you just have this very unique regulatory-driven bull cycle that I think is going to go on longer and higher than anyone expects. And so the metaphor that I would use, this is not 2026 AI. This is calling AI a bubble in 2023. I think we're in the second or third inning. You're just now estimates on the sell side are far behind the curve in terms of, so the stocks kind of look expensive and a lot of easy money has been made. But I think, on the supply side, you've got that, and then you've got 5% demand growth such that you now have this positive spread of double digits between supply and demand, and then it's feeding into, it's going to be a big margin recovery and a lot of rate increases that we're already seeing.
Yeah, I mean, look, trucking's a commodity. You know this. You study the market. I think anyone who sort of has been in the industry understands how commoditized, particularly truckload is. It's interesting, John Kingston, who from your time at FreightWaves, is our oil reporter, has studied commodity markets his whole life. He has always argued it's the incremental barrel, or in this case, the incremental truck, that actually sets the motion of the market. Is that ultimately, it's not about the percent, but we're talking about 5 to 20%. That is a profound amount of capacity. If we got to the point of adding 25% capacity from 2019 to really the sort of peak of that was in 2023, then one could argue that we're going the opposite direction And so we're going to have the inverse, but even more. I mean, commodity markets, when you have effectively a short squeeze, actually go much more hyperbolic because the price is always getting sort of set in the market, and people are incrementally being forced to pay up. That is very different than in the downside of it, where you have people that are like the incremental cost of running a truck just means they're going to set out. So you could see a situation where freight rates, I had someone on X predict, we'll say this is not my prediction, I'll be very careful, that freight rates could get double digits in spot. Do you think that's possible?
Well, so I live and eat and breathe this every day for a living. And so I've seen this in ocean shipping a lot. And when the cargo needs to get to the retail shelf to make a final sale, and I think, Craig, you and I have talked about this many times, transportation cost is something like 3 to 5% of the final good, the price. And so if it comes down to missing out on a sale or paying 20% more for your trucking costs when your carriers have taken a 50% on the cost side, I think that, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think in the more bullish cases, double-digit spot rates, it sounds absolutely crazy, but I think that would be the super cycle case. I think for now, we just have a very strong multi-year bull case, and you're looking at, what are we in the high twos right now with some upward
We're in the threes. If you look at it from taking fuel out of the picture, which fuel's now effectively cheaper today, we're still, I think, at 363, 370 on van spot rates. So
I mean, I think a JB Hunt executive said last week at the conference that it's just kind of like a bare minimum base case of a 20% 2-year contractual rate increase in 26 and 27. And so that's not even in the models. Our new analyst and I were redoing all of our truckload models, and I'd say the base case right now, and most of those on the OTR side, dedicated is a little different, but it's maybe high single-digit rate increases is what's baked into consensus estimates, with more like a low 90s OR, and that's nowhere near peak. And I think double-digit on the contractual side, especially, they talked about it last week, a lot of mini bids, entire books being repriced because you've got almost 20% tender rejections. That's just not sustainable. And so I think as long as you have visibility to the supply side, and then we didn't even get to the exciting part, which is, with peace today in Iran, something like 50% of freight is big ticket and interest rate sensitive on the housing and the construction and the auto side. And so I think the market is beginning to price in some disinflation and a peak in bond yields, and that could get. So we had gone from the dot plot having 1 or 2 cuts, I think, before war started, to something of the inverse, and now we could go back the other way. So demand could get even better. I think if you hit the Montgomery, it's hard to, it depends on enforcement, but I think you could make the case that something like between 50 and 90% of carriers, need a better safety rating. And then you've got Delilah's Law, which we haven't even talked about as well, which could pass. And so, yeah, the numbers almost seem fake if you want to carry it out to as high as it could go.
It does seem absolutely insane when you think about the fact that Knight-Swift stock is something like the PE ratio is 380 or something insane.
Yeah, it's still in the low 20s, and I would just tell you on that one in particular,
What's in the low 20s? You mean the stock price? Or no, it's not.
The PE, the forward PE.
The forward PE, okay.
Yeah. I mean, they're expensive, but we were doing our models, and we were getting something like 50% upside to consensus expectations
from today's stock price at 80.
On the 2027 consensus Bloomberg earnings estimates for some of the more spot rate sensitive and OTR heavy. But that was basically the delta between their numbers and ours. Was we thought we could get to at least low double-digit contractual rate increases with something more like a high 80s OR. Yep. And a company like Knight-Swift did a 78 handle back in 2021. And then you could also argue, I think they get 20% from LTL now, which is a higher margin business anyways. And so,
and they have the benefit of US Express.
You start if you get disinflation on the cost side, where it's not going up 10% every year, and maybe it's only low single digits, even with some driver wage pressure, just the incremental margins of this business are incredibly powerful.
So much operating leverage.
Yeah, the idea of 20% rate increases over 2 years, I mean, unheard of in the course of my career from a
Well,
contract
it's
standpoint.
unheard of because but we saw.
We've not ever seen this amount of capacity actually.
That's true.
Before.
And plus we did see, I mean, in sort of fairness to that argument, Julie, is that we've seen a rate decrease of 25% from the height of contract rates to the bottom.
Right.
But you're right. That's why I don't think 20% rate increases is unheard of.
Because they've fallen so much. Yes.
Because
and
to your
it's
point,
necessary. I mean, if we're being honest and we're looking at companies do need to be under a 90 OR, right? Those, like you mentioned before, to be sustainable.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I would make a strong argument that trucking rates have just been way too low organically because of the low end capacity in the market from non-domiciled CDLs and things like that. The true organic trucking rate should have been much higher to begin with because you couldn't make a return on your assets. You saw even the best, largest enterprise fleets got down to 100 or even more ORs at the trough here of the freight recession, which is just insane, as you know. And so you were really penalizing the publicly traded enterprise large fleets that pay a lot for their trucks, pay up for the insurance, don't change their DOT numbers, et cetera. So, I just don't see when trucking accidents, I think it was quoted, were up 20% over the last 10 years, despite advances in technology, et cetera. I just don't think the government's going to go back the other way in terms of enforcing safety in this industry.
We had Derek Bars in studio a couple weeks ago, who's head of the FMCSA, the primary cop, if you will, regulator for trucking. He's argued that they're just getting started. And he's like, look, we have a set of things that we're trying to get accomplished. You mentioned Delilah's Law. We have to get the highway transportation bill, but we don't even need Delilah's Law. Tom Albright pointed that out on Friday, is that yes, Delilah's Law will be a massive sort of permanent fixture, but you have FMCSA is really looking at self-certification around ELD devices. We're trying to remove that because that's been a point of fraud. The entry-level driver training program, which is basically no training required. They're looking to update that rule and that statute. You have the states doing things around the rules. And then you have Montgomery, which was sort of an unexpected win. All these things are happening. And it just feels like this industry, this capacity crunch is getting started because, as my father liked to point out on the show, demographically, truck drivers are hard. Like ultimately, that's the capacity constraint. Is how do you attract truck drivers? And for the last, say, 5, maybe 10 years, even maybe longer than that, immigration's been a fantastic resource for fleets and had this capacity increase. That's no longer easy access, as you're having to put so much different pressure. Jordan Graft on the show earlier, the CEO of Highway, talked about the fact that a large percent of the carrier base don't even have ratings. And as we heard from our first guest, an attorney said those guys are probably not going to get loaded.
Yeah. I mean, the way I look at it, as an investor, I spend all day, especially we're a long short fund, it's a more conservative strategy. And so we spend a great deal of time just thinking through risk and reward, right, in terms of our long investments. And, when you look at it on the trucking side, it's, are you willing to risk an 8 or 9 figure lawsuit to not pay 50 cents more a mile and let your carrier just earn a small margin? Yeah. Even if a doubling of operating margins, you're talking about, the whole industry earned a 5 or 10% margin. That would be great, right, compared to where we've come from.
I mean, it's insane that Heartland runs at a 108, PAM, PTSI runs at a 112. Even Werner had some quarters where they hadn't made a profit. These are high quality earnings that should have all of the operating benefits and scale that you would normally expect. Even J.B. Hunt, in their truck operation, was running at a high 90. I mean, and Knight-Swift, even when you look at US Press's poor performance, which, look, in full disclosure, is my family's company at one point. Now it's sold off. The idea is that if all these businesses with all of the advantages can't make a profit, you can only imagine what a mid-market carrier is doing.
If they're compliant and following the rules.
That's right, because the non-compliant guys did not care. Like, in fact, they probably were, not probably, we know there's so many cases of them non-being compliant, and that gave them an advantage because they could pay cheaper labor, they could run wide open. There's so many advantages that non-being compliant versus what the big guys couldn't do. Yep. So they're going to ask, are we on the cusp of a trucking super cycle?
I think so, knowing that I manage money and this is going to live on forever. That's my base case is I guess what I touched on earlier. I've always liked ocean shipping because we can take a look at these shipyards.
90%.
And I can know for certain how many container ships or dry bulk ships or tankers are coming into the market. And, I think if you look at truckload cycles, that are regular every 3 years going back to 1980, as soon as the party starts, it starts to spoil. And so I would say at a bare minimum, I have almost like there's a partial moat, to use the Warren Buffett term, in trucking in terms of the regulatory stuff going on, such that you're going to earn a higher return on equity and probably be profitable and get some rate increases. I think bare minimum, another way I'm thinking of it is if capacity is contracting at 5%, to have a continued bull market, all you need is for demand to be negative 5% or better. And I think that's a low bar. Recently, it's something more like closer to 5, and rail data has been 5, and LTL volumes
Industrials have been.
So I would start with we're going to have a really good 2 or 3 years, and I would also argue that these stocks should not begin to, typically with cyclicals, you would have a high multiple right now because you're about to earn a lot more, and then you get a low multiple because people think the party's going to end. I think for at least the next couple of years, these earnings are not only you have a very high visibility to a lot of growth. I think the sell side estimates are behind the curve in terms of the contractual rate increases coming down the pike, and then that means better and better margins. So I would start with just I think we're going to have a really good 2 or 3 years after a really bad 4.
There is data to find out the state of the freight market. You use Sonar.
Yep.
You grew up helping build a lot of the Sonar information and interpretation, so you're definitely well positioned to know what is happening in real
All
time.
the things. You can see
in real
imports,
time.
you can see ships coming in, you can see by commodity what's hitting there, by carloads.
I get asked that all the time by institutional investors, why can't everyone else just copy the data like you? And I think, being here, having a front row seat to the engineers and watching it organically build and then speaking with you and everyone else about it. Yeah, I have a pretty good handle on when the data is going to start to decay, and I'll be watching it closely. Hopefully it doesn't.
Hopefully in a couple good years.
Yeah. Outside of your ties to Sonar and FreightWaves, based on your history, what do you think the benefit is for you being sector specific, being here in Chattanooga, not being in New York?
Okay, yeah, that's a great one. I think about 80% or more of what I invest in is cyclical. So one, if you're trying to build a fund that lasts for decades, it's hard to have 2 or 3 really good years and then get clobbered in a down year. So what we're really trying to build is, so we run long, short, and lower net. And the idea is to basically find all the transportation bull cycles and put long capital there. And then find all the transportation bear cycles and put short capital there, such that a lot of people also can't withstand the volatility that's inherent in this sector. So just the Dow Jones Transportation Index, it went nowhere for 4 years with a ton of volatility. You're talking, if it were a long-only product, you'd have maybe regular double-digit down months. So I'd say it creates a portfolio that smooths it out, and then hopefully our goal is to create a double-digit return stream even when the backdrop isn't that favorable.
So Seth, when I think about the Dow Jones Transport Index, the problem that you have things like Avis that are in the index, you have airlines. We need to figure out how to create a pure play ETF.
Yeah, I've had the same issue. I have a lot of people trying to sell me factor baskets and other things to hedge with, and there's really no good benchmark for our fund.
We're going to get this done. We're going to do an ETF. We're going to tie it to these basket of stocks. We're going to work on that. That's up next, right?
Or hopefully they just invest with me.
You could do both.
You want to create a free competitor and destroy the.
Well, you got to make building an ETF with transports being a much more pure play. Who says you can't manage
it's a $10 trillion industry?
Yeah.
How about it? Yeah.
It's a massive industry, so much to talk about. I've got to ask before we go, because people like actionable data. Of the stocks in your world, which are you most bullish on and which one are you most bearish on?
Yeah, so I kind of bucket into subsectors. Truckload, I'm hugely bullish on. And specifically, I started out early on the spot exposed over the road players. I think the second leg of the trade that gets really excited is more of the dedicated intermodal stuff, because as you know, that tends to recover with a multi-quarter lag. LTL, I also like, you're seeing the PMI expansionary, 5 straight months, I believe it is, for the first time in 4 years, new orders heating up. So truckload, LTL, intermodal, rails, parcels, I all like. Brokerage to me is more of a question mark. I think just in the super near term, in terms of how's the net change between the squeeze from the spot rates moving up and the insurance inflation going to net out against the increase in spot volumes and probably the market share that the large brokers are definitely taking in the post-Montgomery. So, but I like it all. I mean, it's kind of like, who's your favorite child right now? It's a good time to be investing in this. I think all of it, there was a valuation downgrade on the sell side today. I just think this is a sector without economic recession or calamity, you can just buy the dips probably in this sector and do pretty well over the next couple of years.
Amazing. I mean, it is. You talked about how exciting your favorite children. I love what's happening right now from a freight standpoint because it's never been more pertinent to how people are thinking about the reindustrialization. It plays into the different parts of the economy. You mentioned rail freight. That's the big counter argument because one of the, I call it debates out there, is how much of this is really supply driven versus demand driven. We certainly know that demand isn't as robust as it could be. But when you look at industrials, rail data is probably the best proxy for that. It does tell us that the industrials are starting to increase. And as you mentioned in T's, that certainly helps the LTL carriers.
Yeah, the industrial side is really kind of picking up. You have the whole housing side, which hasn't even done anything.
Yeah, and Brad was pretty you were sitting in studio, so you didn't hear it, but Brad, who is now the founder of QXO and is, $18 billion in revenue for a company that's 2 years old, has talked about the fact that he was very non-conclusive about the direction of the economy, which he actually admitted was an unusual statement for him, that he didn't have a real sense for it. I think housing's the big factor.
Yeah, and I think to add on to that, I think if you look at truckload, it's so fragmented to begin with. I mean, even Knight-Swift has something like a 1% or less market share of a $500 billion for-hire industry or $1 trillion total. I think the large enterprise carriers are definitely going to take a lot, and already are, taking significant market share post-Montgomery. So that will offset any of the freight displacement that may go to intermodal or back the heavier stuff that might go back to LTL. So.
Yeah. I just talked to my brother-in-law and was like, now would be an ideal time for me to be selling, truckload and dedicated freight versus when I was.
If XD, which we talked with Drew from, which was our on-demand, you pay, we guarantee your capacity, we don't guarantee your price. Express Direct, taking advantage of those rips, as we like to call them in freight. It'd be an amazing time to be in that business. So my phone would be ringing off the hook at 10 o'clock at night for 100 truckloads. Absolutely, diesel in my blood, could not wait. Well,
you've been figuring out how to get some flatbeds.
That's true. That's true. Steph,
yeah.
Thank you so much for coming into studio here in Chattanooga, Westboro Capital. If you're interested in having exposure to the logistics names, Seth is the guy to call. Seth, I hope you come back in studio and give us an update. Every earnings, we got to have you on for earnings to talk about it.
I'd be happy to, and thank you, Craig and Julie, for having me on.
And enjoy JP Hampstead, who is one of our own. Seth is one of our own too. JP has been here, it feels like an institution forever. We've got a break, and we'll get right back, and we're going to talk about speeding tickets and what drivers can do to mitigate their speeding tickets and get them off the record.
In today's freight environment, every second of uptime matters. Of course, maintenance is inevitable, but large fleets cannot succeed on reactive fixes alone. That's why Love's Truck Care delivers smarter preventative maintenance. Love's understands that operational pressures demand a nationwide service network for better visibility, actionable intelligence, and consistent execution, all of which you protect your assets, reduce your total cost of ownership, and maximize your uptime. Maintenance is, of course, inevitable, but large fleets cannot succeed on reactive fixes alone. That's why Love's Truck Care delivers smarter preventative maintenance. Learn more.
Race car drivers like NASCAR champion Jesse Love are a lot like commercial drivers, pros. But even the best in the world still watch the tape to see what they missed and get better next time. So we created the Samsara driving coach.
Great race, Jesse, but you were following too closely and you were speeding.
Okay, you got me on that one.
Samsara uses insights from millions of professional drivers to coach drivers in real time.
Because even champions need a coach.
Give me the keys.
map is changing. As global uncertainties rise, the future of the supply chain is moving closer to home. Welcome to the new Coast to Coast North American network, driven by massive reshoring trends and next-gen industrial innovation, optimized by AI workflows that build unshakable operational resilience, and locked down by proactive security against evolving freight fraud. Are you ready to navigate the shift? Join the industry's top minds to build the future. The FreightWaves Domestic Supply Chain Summit, streaming live June 17th. Register for free at live.freightwaves.com.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Today. Next up, how do you get things off your record for those drivers? It's a career-ending thing, potentially, if you get a speeding violation or a traffic violation. The man to tell us what to do is Alex Jirgis, the CEO and co-founder of Off the Record. Alex, welcome to FreightWaves Today.
Hello. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me on.
So I'm going to ask, what do? You get a speeding ticket if you're a commercial driver. How exactly do you guys help them resolve that? And what are the implications of those tickets?
So what you do as a CDL driver, as an active commercial driver, when you get a ticket is the same thing you do if, no matter what kind of driver you are, is you fight the tickets. It's a bit of a shocking statement, but only 5% of the country's 220 million drivers actually fight their tickets. It's higher on the CDL side because we understand that the impact of a traffic ticket for active commercial drivers is a lot greater. There are greater consequences. But even among active commercial drivers, it's a lower percent than we would expect who know to contest the ticket. What we often see is folks coming to us after the fact when the consequences have already hit. So what you do when you get a ticket is always the same. You fight the ticket.
Okay, so walk us through what happens when a commercial driver actually gets a violation. How does the FMCSA enforce it? How does that actually work? What do they do?
Yeah, great question. So here's the key point. It's the conviction that leads to the disqualification, the 60 or 120-day disqualification. It is not the ticket itself. It is not the incident itself. And the disqualification starts at the time of conviction. So it doesn't start on the road when you get the ticket. It starts when that ticket goes on your record and you are found guilty. When you are pulled over, the first thing you should do is consider fighting the ticket. You can hire a lawyer on your own. You can appear in court on your own, or you can this is what we do. It's what Off the Record does. It's why we exist. When you have that lawyer, the lawyer goes to court, puts up a defense on your behalf. If the ticket is dismissed or the charge is reduced to what's considered a non-serious traffic offense, then you're good. That ticket will not, it will not count towards your 2-ticket disqualification number. Now, if the ticket unfortunately does land on your record, the case is not successful, then that one ticket goes on your record. If you get another ticket, that's when, or another conviction rather, that's when the 60-day disqualification would start. Now, what we see is active commercial drivers will not contest the first ticket oftentimes, but then they'll get the second ticket and they realize that it's a bigger matter now because this second conviction would bench them, essentially.
Yeah, under the rules, 2 excessive speeding violations in 3 years means a 60-day suspension, so they could literally be out of work for 60 days. What is the definition of excessive speeding, Alex?
Yeah, great question. So this is, the definitions for your common driver versus an active commercial driver are very different. And this applies to DUIs. It also applies to speeding. So what the FMCSA considers excessive speeding is 15 miles above the limit or anything above 15, which to the average driver is not all that excessive. Same thing with, I mean, not that many DUIs happen in commercial vehicles, but the limit is 0.04 instead of 0.08. So there are a lot of these, in a lot of states, California being one of them, the points are, you get 1.5 times the points on your record if you are a commercial driver. So it's important to note these differences as an active commercial driver.
And Alex, what is the process? So I'm a commercial driver, I get a ticket. Walk us through how you guys help them dispute these tickets.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So Off the Record is a platform that connects drivers and people with attorneys for various legal matters. Traffic tickets and traffic matters has been and continues to be our bread and butter. It makes up 57% of local and state court filings. So traffic is the number one legal matter in the country. So you're not alone if you get a ticket, whether you're a commercial driver or a regular driver, you're not alone if you get a ticket. Off the Record is where you go to, you book your case, you tell us about your ticket, you get an instant quote right away. If you are interested in moving forward and booking a case, you pay your legal fee, and right away, a local experienced traffic attorney will start handling your case. The majority of the time, 95% of the time, the driver will never have to appear in court. This is true whether they have a regular license or a commercial license. And the Off the Record then manages the case. You get real-time updates through the website, through our app. You get real-time updates every time something happens. We have a lot of carriers, trucking carriers, who have corporate accounts with Off the Record now because, long haul drivers can't afford to fly back into any given state when their court date comes for a traffic ticket that they got a month or two ago. And so Off the Record really makes it convenient to fight your ticket. A question we get often, so I'll preempt it here, is do you just fight regular tickets or do you also fight CDL tickets? We do both, and we have attorneys that specialize in both. So when you put your ticket information on the platform, we ask you if you're a CDL driver or what kind of license you have, and we connect you to the right attorney based on the information that you give us.
Alex, why don't people dispute tickets? Is it just time and they just pay it because it's easier to pay?
So there's a few reasons. The number one reason is people, Americans in general, don't associate a traffic ticket as a legal matter. Many of us, we get a ticket and we think of it as a bill, like an electricity bill. But a traffic ticket is not a bill. It's not just a fine that you need to pay. It's a legal matter. When you pay that fine, you are pleading guilty. That ticket goes on your record, and there are downstream consequences. This is true whether you have a regular license or you are an active commercial driver. Now, there are this is the biggest reason. The other reasons are people think it's going to cost too much, that it's going to be too complicated. It's because they've never done it before. We are proud of the fact that many of our clients are first-time ticket fighters, whether CDL or regular license, and there's a bit of anxiety the first time you try the platform. They get over that real quick when they see how easy it is to book. It takes about 2 minutes to book a case, and then your lawyer takes over. Lawyer may have questions, clarifying questions about what happened, but for the most part, they do the heavy lifting and go to court on your behalf, take care of all the paperwork for you.
Well, look, Alex, unfortunately, we don't have time to dive into this. You had amazing data. Gonna have you back. Great advice, Julie. I need your number. I need your website. I'm gonna use it. Unfortunately, I have a few tickets in my life. Look, amazing show, great show. You can get this on demand. You can listen if you missed anything today at 5 o'clock on Road Dog Network on SiriusXM. You can watch it every morning at 6 and 8 a.m. It's also available on demand. We had an amazing guest. And tomorrow we continue the party. We have Andrew, the CEO of Torque Robots, Andrew Culhane. We have Stefan Heck, who built Nado to prevent collisions before they happen. He is the AI CEO of the year. And then we have Curtis Spencer, the CEO of IMS Worldwide, who's going to talk about rail, port, and intermodal trends. That is tomorrow. Tune in to FreightWaves Today.